Well, wedding season is upon us, and if you're like us in California, you will provide sound at the ceremony a lot. So I want to talk today a little bit about how to do that, what's involved. It's funny to me, I see people on DJ sites on Facebook all the time talking about how to mic for a ceremony. And to me, it's not that difficult, but we make it harder than it is. But here's how we mic for ceremonies almost always. Very simple. 2 lavalier mics, and there are different kinds of lavalier. Just means a lapel mic, right? And then you have directional, omnidirectional. There's some different things, and I don't want to get into all of that. But basically what we're typically doing is I'm providing 2 microphones, lavalier style mics for the ceremony, one on the officiant, one on the groom. Now, if you're only going to do one mic, which I don't suggest, I would suggest that you put that one on the groom, not the officiant. Most people put it on the officiant, but you think in terms of, the officiant is facing everybody and they are projecting, so you'll hear them better anyway, whereas the groom is going to be speaking very softly and facing away from people, so he needs to be mic'd better. The mic is generally facing the bride, and so it'll pick her up pretty well also. So if you're only going to do one, choose the groom instead of the officiant. However, there's no reason to only have one microphone. There's 1,000 reasons to have 2. The only reason to have one is cost, because you don't have to buy another microphone. But that's crazy expense. You should be charging enough to do the ceremony that you'll pay for another quality lav microphone with one ceremony. But you put one on the officiant, now you have a backup, right? So, and things have gone wrong. I mean, we've done hundreds of ceremonies, and I've had a mic go either be turned off somehow. The newer mics all have pro settings, so they can't inadvertently turn them off. But I've had them turned off. I've had them just not work for whatever reason. One just has too much wind and the other one doesn't. And there's just things that are involved. But it gives you 2. The one downside of miking just the groom is at the end of the ceremony, when they turn away from the officiant, you've been hearing one sound, one volume level for the whole thing, but once they turn around, then his voice will drop dramatically for the actual introduction. So I've also had officiants who wander away. We had one a few years ago who actually walked all the way to the back of the guests to do part of the ceremony, which was just weird. But 2, one on each of them. It's not necessary to mic the bride, because the other mics, the lavalier mics, will pick them up. So why a lavalier mic over other microphones? Well, if you use a handheld, clearly the sound is better while you're actually holding it like you should be, but then it becomes what we call the interview ceremony, where the officiant is talking and going back and forth, and it just looks awful. Remember, they're having photos, video probably, and just the actual moment. It's an intimate moment. We want to be able to hear, and you want the volume to be just loud enough that guests can hear comfortably, but it shouldn't sound like an announcement, like it's booming. I always try, when possible, to set the speakers up behind the guests rather than in front of the guests, for a couple of reasons. The biggest thing is the people up front can hear anyway. The people at the back need a little more amplification, and with the speakers back there, then everybody can hear. We can set it at the lowest possible level for everybody to hear. That works out great. It also eliminates more chances of feedback. Lavalier mics are more prone to feedback if you have to turn it up quite a bit. And so when you're up by the front, then especially if you're behind the ceremony, then the sound has to come through the lavalier mics to the guests. So I prefer it at the back. In addition to those, other mics may be used for the ceremony as well. You may do something as, for example, a prayer. Somebody's doing a prayer during the ceremony, and it could be like a grandparent who's sitting among the guests. Oftentimes we'll put a lavalier mic on that person as well, so that when it's time for them to speak, we can just turn their microphone on. They can stand where they're at, or even remain seated sometimes, say what they are going to do, and then it can be dropped out. We'll also sometimes put a microphone on a stand for a reader to come up and do. Try to avoid that when possible, because no matter how often you tell them, they'll get up and they'll stand 2 feet away from the microphone. and it just doesn't pick up very well with a handheld microphone, at least the kind that we use as DJs, which are directional microphones. So when possible, I put individual mics on people, but sometimes we have 3 or 4 different people that are going to get up and do a reading, and then obviously you have to have a corded mic. I'm sorry, a handheld mic for that. So make sure you have the right microphones. The ceremony is the whole point of the day, right? I mean, the reception that we do afterwards is a celebration of what took place earlier, that they were successfully married. It should not look like a production. Ceremony should be intimate, romantic, special. It should have some emotion to it. And if we take out the things that look like production, then we really add to that experience for them. So make sure you get the right microphones. Lots of sources out there. I always recommend Ben Stowe at NL Effects. They know their stuff, and the prices are as good as you're going to get anywhere. And they'll make sure that you have, with all the new changes in microphone technology now, and only certain frequencies that you can be on, you want to make sure that you get the right things. The microphone is the most important tool that we use as DJs. So make sure you get the right ones and make sure you mic them properly. In terms of, I want to cover one more thing. I know we're over a minute today. Shocking. But the other thing I want to cover is I see sometimes people say, well, the officiant or the groom didn't want to wear a microphone. I can tell you in all honesty, in all the years I've been doing this, I literally have never had that come up, and I've done hundreds and hundreds. Now, I have had officiants say, I don't need a microphone, or the groom go, I don't really want to be mic'd. But again, they're why. The groom envisions his voice booming out, and he doesn't want that to be the case. But once they understand that he won't even hear his voice coming over the speakers if you do it correctly. He'll hear his voice just like this, and same thing with his bride. The guests will hear it amplified just enough, and when they understand that, and in terms of the officiant, I'm not very patient with them. I do say, listen, we have to have a microphone on you. We're recording all of this. It's got to be done. And again, the same thing. I don't know what bad experiences you've had in the past with microphones, but we know what we're doing, and we use really good stuff. They're not going to be cutting in and out. You don't have to worry about all that. It's not going to be booming. You won't even know that it's on. It'll be just loud enough so that the guests can hear it. And that usually resolves it for them. I mean, if they don't want, they've probably had some bad experience somewhere along the way. But again, as we talked about in a previous episode, it's perfectly reasonable to take charge and say, yeah, it needs to be done this way. This is the proper way to do it to get the results that we want. So a little over the minute today, but one of the most important things you're going to do all summer is microphones. I hope those tips helped you, and you have some really great, intimate receptions or ceremonies that everybody can hear. We'll see you.